Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk, free for all Friday. Talk about anything you want, 888-589-8840. We're talking a lot about the Second Amendment and the uselessness of gun control legislation. Chicago has got perhaps the strictest gun control laws in the country. And they had 550 murders last year. It's the murder capital of the United States, the homicide capital of the United States. If gun control laws worked, then Illinois ought to be paradise. It ought to be Eden. It ought to be the safest place in the world. 550 people got gunned down in cold blood last year in Chicago. Gun control laws just do not work. All they do is make it impossible for people to defend themselves against evil. And Chicago's off to a bad start this year. They've already had 5 murders. Here we are, January 4. They've had 5 murders. The latest one, a muffler shop owner who would give you the shirt off his back, shot in the back by 2 guys that held up his store. And I'll guarantee you, he didn't have a gun on the premises to defend himself. All he could do was run. They shot him in the back, and he is dead today. And, people are out there buying guns. I mean, they know that Barack Obama is coming for their guns. Here's a story from Hot Air. Big jump in December background checks. FBI reported yesterday that background checks for firearms purchases rose 40% over November in 1 month. What happened in November? Barack Obama got reelected. So, people are out there buying guns in droves. 1 million more people getting background checks this December than did in December of 2011. So people out there buying guns, ammo flying off the shelves. Here's a story from Breitbart.com that gun sales increased in 48 out of the 50 states. And listen to this. 2 of the blue states and the most liberal district in the country, that's D.C., led the way in the increase of background checks. Washington, D.C., background checks rose 49.7%. Wisconsin up 45.4%. New Jersey up 42.5%. So even these people in the blue states, they won't admit it, but they know that having a gun for self-protection is a pretty smart idea. And when they know it's their ox that could be gored, they're the first ones out the door to get a gun. Well, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Jack in Garrison, Texas. Jack, if we can bring Jack in. Jack, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
I'll tell you why they want to take a gun, Brian. I figured it out last night. Janet Master was talking about the Muslim Brotherhood infiltrating the White House,
Uh-huh.
And today, a while ago, I heard that Megyn Kelly on Fox News. She was talking about a show called The Grand Deception. That in '91, there's a Muslim, the North American Muslim speaker, whatever. He's still getting paid by the White House, and he was talking about the White House is, America is trash.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was speaking to the Muslims then. See, when they're speaking for the White House, they're speaking like moderates. But when they're speaking to their own people, they're talking about America and everything. And we're still paying them people.
Yeah.
There's 6 people right now that we're paying in the State Department that speaks. Just pay them to speak.
Well, and it's routine, Jack, in the Muslim world for these Muslim leaders to say one thing in English because, that's what's going to be reported back in the United States. And then when they talk to their fellow Muslims, they'll say something completely different in Arabic. And unless you get that translated, you don't know that's going on. I
think our president is doing that.
Yeah, well, and I think you're right. There's a lot of, this is just a simple fact that people that are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood have constant access to the White House. They're on the visitors logs for the White House. There are people that are in positions where they're being consulted for advice about Islamic issues that are part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Jack, you don't have to go any further than Huma Abedin. She is Hillary Clinton's right-hand aide. She's right next to the Secretary of State all the time, basically 24/7. She's an aide. She's an advisor. and she is a consultant, and she is absolutely hip deep in the Muslim Brotherhood. Her mother is still a leader in the Muslim Brotherhood movement. Her father was at the top of the pyramid in the Muslim Brotherhood movement until his death. And so it's there. I mean, she's obviously got her sympathies with the Muslim Brotherhood. And we've often talked about the fact that President Obama has obviously shown far more sympathy. I don't know if he's a Muslim or not. You know,
because the only way he got elected was by DreamWorks, and I mean they control the voting machines, so that's how he got elected in 3 states.
Yeah. Well, and again, the issue of whether President Obama himself is a Muslim, I'm not even going to venture on that because we don't have proof one way or another. We know that a foreign official in Egypt claimed that President Obama told him in private that I am a Muslim, and you will see that unfold in my administration. Now, that's just hearsay. It's one guy saying that's what he was told by the president. So there's a limited amount of weight that we can place on that. But one thing is absolutely clear is President Obama has shown far more sympathy toward the Muslim faith than he's ever shown toward the Christian faith. He's talked about the wonderful contributions that Islam has made to the history of the United States. I've never heard him ever, not one time, say anything about the contributions of Christianity to the history of America. So.
He will not mention it at all, and that to me that's disgraceful. But the thing about it is, what scares me is their children, their grandchildren, that America is falling so far down that we're letting all these senators. The only reason they're going with the president is because they all got a raise. He's paying them just like the Muslims paid to get into Africa. They went in there throwing out gold and jewels and everything, and then they started taking kids off women's backs and everything and beating them in the head, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's an interesting thing, and I appreciate the call, Jack. Thank you for weighing in on that. There's an interesting story from the Times of Israel today about Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. They are refusing to take in Muslim refugees from Syria. You've got maybe 150,000 Muslim Palestinian refugees that are in Syria. They need some place to go. Syria's heating up. And so they are pleading with Hamas and the Palestinian Authority to take them into the Gaza Strip or to the West Bank, and they will not do it. Hamas won't let them come into the Gaza Strip, and the Palestinian Authority is not going to let them go to the West Bank. And you know why? Because they want to keep them in these squalid refugee camps for political purposes. This whole thing about these refugee camps, I mean, what you've had these refugee camps since 1948, and the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Syrians could have assimilated these refugees. I mean, Israel has been assimilating refugees from all over the world since 1948. These surrounding Muslim nations could have done that. All of these Palestinians could be Jordanians by now, or they could be Egyptians by now, or they could be Syrians by now. They could be Saudis by now, but they're not. Why? Because these Muslim nations don't want them. They want to keep them in these squalid refugee camps because they can use them as political pawns. And they flat out said in this case that the reason we don't want them to take them as refugees is if we do, then Israel is going to say, well, look, these refugees don't need to return to Israel because they've been relocated to homes in the Gaza Strip, so we don't need to bring them in to Israel. Remember, that's a big deal for the Palestinians. They want the right of return. They want to be able to go back to Israel en masse and basically become the majority of the population and then take control of the government. So they're not going to let these people, they're going to let them rot in these refugee camps instead of showing an ounce of compassion, bringing them into their homeland because they want to continue to use them as political pawns. Let's go to Patrick, Texarkana, Texas. Welcome to Focal Point. Patrick, what's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, I just wanted to make one comment. You were speaking earlier about the government basically going to force Christian companies to allow just anybody to work there, and you pointed out the homosexual as an example. And personally, I am against it. I'm not saying I'm for it, but here's a positive I can think about it. If I walked in my local Christian bookstore and there's a homosexual and he's very open about it, that's the first person I'm witnessing to, and he can't do a thing about it in the Christian bookstore.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's an upside. You'd know, I mean, they would be self-identifying, and these would be obviously people that would be in need of spiritual help. So.
Absolutely. Hopefully they'd have 100+ Christians a day witnessing to them.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good word, Patrick. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. And, I came across a story today, and we'll finish the hour with this. This is a story I found on the Blaze, reporting on a study that is profiled in the London Telegraph, major newspaper in the UK. And it says this: people who are spiritual but not religious are more vulnerable to mental disorders. This is very, very important research that's been done here, because a lot of people, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm in touch with my inner self, and I'm into this Eastern religion, and I do meditation, and I do yoga, and I'm into that whole Hindu hundreds of millions of gods things. And what this researcher discovered is people that take that point of view are vulnerable to mental disorders at an exceptionally high rate compared to Christians that are involved in a church fellowship. Here's how the story begins. Could spirituality without organized religion actually be bad for your mental health? A new study indicates that individuals who claim to be spiritual but who lack an allegiance to a specific religion, primarily Christianity, may in fact be more likely to suffer from mental health problems. This is research conducted by Professor Michael King at University College in London. It was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry. Quote, there is increasing evidence that people who profess spiritual beliefs in the absence of a religious framework are more vulnerable to mental disorders, more likely to be dependent on drugs, suffer from a phobia, and have a generalized anxiety disorder. In other words, Christianity, ladies and gentlemen, works.